Have you ever stopped to think about how a simple look of disdain can reveal much more about the person who casts it than about the person who receives it? Sometimes a moment, a seemingly ordinary scene, is enough to reveal what lies within a person's heart. And that's precisely why today's story begins in a simple cafe. So simple that many would walk right past without even noticing the strong aroma of freshly brewed coffee or the quiet coziness of the place. But there, in that discreet corner of the city, a black woman was having her breakfast with an almost poetic tranquility, as if she were at peace with the world. Have you ever experienced situations like that, where everything seemed calm, until someone came along to spoil the moment? That's exactly what happened when the cafe door opened and a billionaire walked in with the air of someone who believes the whole world revolves around him. Arrogant, hurried, impatient, he looked at everything with such blatant superiority that it seemed to weigh heavily on the air. He observed every detail of that simple environment with an almost studied disdain, as if he were assessing how far below his standard of living that place was. Little did he know that each step he took led him directly to one of the greatest lessons of his life. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover might surprise you. As soon as the billionaire crossed the room, his eyes landed on the woman sitting alone, humbly dressed, calmly, savoring her coffee. And it was there that his arrogance found a target. He began to chuckle softly, then to comment ironically, as if it were funny that someone like her was there, so simple, so ordinary. With each word, with each sideways glance, he made it clear that he didn't consider her worthy of attention, much less respect. Perhaps you felt something similar. That moment when someone tries to diminish another just to feel bigger. But there's something powerful in those who stand firm, who don't react to the attack, who know exactly their own worth, even when others try to erase it. While he hurled insults at her, making offensive comments to anyone who would listen, the woman remained serene, almost untouchable. The contrast between the two was so stark that the atmosphere itself seemed divided. On one side, the gigantic ego of a man accustomed to being feared. On the other, the silent dignity of a woman accustomed to surviving far worse things than an arrogant laugh. And this, of course, bothered her even more, because nothing irritates an arrogant person more than someone who refuses to react to their provocation. But the billionaire didn't know, and didn't even suspect, who he was humiliating at that moment. He had no idea of that woman's story, the weight of her journey, or the secrets that Café hid. What seemed to him just another episode of everyday arrogance, to her was merely a moment observed with patience, like someone who already knows the end of the story before it even begins. Have you ever experienced something like that? That feeling that deep down life is about to turn the tables. And it is precisely from this unlikely encounter that the true turning point begins to unfold. A turning point he could never have imagined. Because while he laughed, commented, and belittled himself, he was about to discover that the woman's humble appearance was merely the surface of a much greater truth. And that truth, well, that truth would begin to appear in the very next moment, when something unexpected happens, and his smile begins to falter, little by little, like a mask tearing away. And that's when the story really takes a turn that no one in that cafe expected. And before this twist takes shape, let me ask you something. Does this situation evoke any familiar feelings in you? Because while that scene unfolded in that simple cafe, many people around felt exactly what you might be feeling now. A mixture of indignation, curiosity, and that quiet hope that life, from time to time, puts everyone in their rightful place. And if this topic resonates with you, if something in this story has touched a memory of yours, leave a comment below about what has resonated with you the most so far. Sometimes, what you share ends up helping other people who have gone through something similar, and this creates a support network that goes far beyond the video. And since we're walking through this intense narrative together, take the opportunity to like the video. It seems simple, but it makes a huge difference in ensuring this type of content continues to reach those who need to hear stories like this. When you like, comment, or share, you're essentially telling YouTube, hey, this content matters, show it to more people, and this greatly helps to keep this space alive, strong, and full of stories that inspire, provoke, and move people. And of course, if you enjoy this style of poetic justice stories, unexpected twists, and reflections that stay with you for hours after the video ends, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. It's free, quick, and ensures you're always here with me when new narratives like this one arrive. Your participation is what makes this channel grow and reach more people with this type of message, and I'm very grateful for that. But getting back to what really matters now, at that moment, when the billionaire still believed he was in control of the situation, something began to change inside. That cafe, something subtle, almost imperceptible, a glance exchanged, an unexpected gesture, a word spoken at the exact moment, and that's when his mask truly began to crack, revealing that the story was about to take a turn that no one, not even he, could have predicted. The atmosphere inside that cafe seemed to change with every word the billionaire spoke. It was as if the air grew heavier, more tense, each time he raised his voice to complain about the service, the ambiance, the details that only bother those who believe everything should be tailored to their own ego. He spoke as if he were above everyone there, as if his presence in that simple space were a favor, and when his eyes returned to the black woman sitting calmly, his arrogance intensified, almost as if he needed to prove to himself that he possessed some kind of superiority. He mocked the way she held her cup, the way she dressed, even her silence, as if serenity were a flaw, a weakness, something laughable. And while his pride overflowed, it was impossible not to notice the growing discomfort among the other customers. Some lowered their eyes, trying not to get involved. Others watched the scene with indignation, like someone witnessing something wrong and knowing it shouldn't be happening. There was a certain collective unease, as if everyone perceived that it had crossed any line of respect. The woman, however, remained there, seated in the same position, with the same tranquil posture, as if time had a different rhythm for her. She didn't react. She didn't retaliate. She showed no sign of irritation. It was almost impossible to understand how someone could maintain so much control in the face of such open humiliation. And perhaps that's why the billionaire became even more irritated, because his lack of reaction took away the spotlight he felt he deserved. He needed her submission to validate his own importance, but he couldn't find it. And this destabilized him inside, although he tried to disguise it with more laughter and malicious comments. But there was something about that woman, a firm gaze that he couldn't interpret, a gaze that said much more than any spoken word. It was the gaze of someone accustomed to facing storms, of someone who knows how to recognize the hidden truth behind social masks, of someone who has seen a lot in life and is not shaken by any explosion of ego. This contrast created a silent tension that spread through the atmosphere. Her serenity seemed like an invisible barrier against his attacks, and this stark difference began to attract even more attention. People who had previously been focused on their own thoughts began to observe discreetly, realizing that this moment carried something greater, something that went beyond a simple argument between strangers. Some wondered who this woman was. Others, why such a wealthy man seemed so bothered by someone so seemingly simple. This kind of collective discomfort usually arises when we witness an injustice, when we realize that we are facing abusive behavior that reveals more about the aggressor's mentality than about their victim. And as the billionaire raised his voice, something inside him seemed to reveal the depths of his own insecurity. Sometimes excessive pride is nothing more than a fragile armor built to hide deep fears that no one sees. And the more he spoke, the more evident it became that he needed that spectacle to reaffirm something to himself. He didn't humiliate the Woman simply because he considered her inferior. He did it because he needed to feel superior. But with each failed attempt to provoke a reaction, his posture lost strength, as if the foundations of that arrogance began to crack. It was like observing a hidden truth about to emerge, slowly, at life's own pace. The woman remained impassive, almost as if she knew that this scene wasn't the end, but only part of a much larger journey. It was possible to sense that she didn't see this man as powerful. To her, he was merely someone lost in his own self-importance, someone who hadn't yet learned that decisions guided by contempt always exact a high price. And perhaps this silent reading was precisely what irritated him most. He wanted to see her break. He wanted to see her lose control. He wanted any sign that his words had an impact. But he found nothing but calm. A calm so profound that it became a mirror, reflecting his own character flaws. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because there's an essential detail in this story, something that doesn't appear on the surface, but that explains why this woman was able to maintain such composure while the billionaire lost himself in his own arrogance. There are people who have been through so much in life, so many trials, so many silent struggles, that they have learned to see the behavior of others with a clarity that many people don't have. People who understand that some attacks don't deserve a response, because responding to them would be descending to a level where they no longer belong. People who have transformed pain into wisdom, humiliation into strength, challenges into character building. This kind of maturity creates a different, almost magnetic presence that makes even the harshest attacks seem small in the face of inner firmness. And while the billionaire continued his failed attempt to diminish her, the feeling in the air was that the real revelation was yet to come. Something big was in motion, something that would completely change that dynamic, something that would irrefutably show who truly held power in that room. Not the power of money, but the power of dignity. Comment below. I'm on this journey too. The silence the woman maintained was not an empty silence. It was a silence full of purpose, as if each second were calculated with the maturity of someone who knows exactly when to speak and when to let the other person get lost in their own arrogance. And it was precisely when the billionaire let out another mocking laugh, as if believing he had won a dispute that only he could see, that she slowly raised her gaze and asked a simple question, but one laden with a weight he could never have foreseen. Do you really believe that someone's worth is determined by what they wear? The phrase pierced the air like a discreet, thin, precise blade. There was no anger, no aggression. There was only a sincere curiosity, a questioning that effortlessly exposed the chasm between the two. The billionaire, unable to admit any discomfort, laughed again. A louder, more forced laugh, as if trying to convince everyone, and especially himself, that the question was unimportant. But it was. It was important because, for the first time since entering that cafe, he couldn't answer immediately. And this tiny hesitation was noticed by anyone observing the scene attentively. It was as if, at that instant, the arrogant discourse that sustained him began to crack, revealing a hidden truth behind all that inflated posture. He tried to compose himself, make some sarcastic comment, downplay her words, but something had changed. In that brief second, the woman had shifted the conversation from the realm of humiliation to the realm of conscience. And he didn't know how to operate in that field. The tension that already existed in the atmosphere gained another deeper layer. It was as if everyone present had realized that a new chapter in that story was beginning, a chapter that would call into question not only the billionaire's arrogance, but the mentality behind his actions, the way he made decisions, the way he evaluated the world and the people around him. Her question wasn't just about clothes, it was about value, respect, dignity, elements that cannot be bought with money but are built throughout an entire journey. It was then that a discreet movement caught their attention. One of the cafe employees, a young man with measured steps and a respectful gaze, approached the table. He seemed to hesitate between speaking or retreating, as if he knew his intervention would change the course of the situation. When he finally leaned closer to the woman, his words were spoken in a low tone, but firm enough for everyone around to hear. "Doctor, if you need anything, I'm at your disposal." Or perhaps it was, "Madam President, your additional request is already being prepared." Regardless of which way it was said, the impact was the same. The sound of that word, doctor or president, reverberated through the room like an unexpected announcement, a revelation that was only not immediately understood by one person, the billionaire himself. Eyes met among the customers. Some discreetly raised their eyebrows. Others leaned back in their chairs, as if witnessing something grand without having planned it. The silent audience in that cafe understood before he did. They understood that there was a much bigger story there than it seemed, that this woman, so calm, so firm, carried a different kind of power. Not the power displayed in luxury cars or expensive watches, but a power born from experience, from inner transformation, from earned authority. The billionaire, however, took a few seconds to process what he had heard. He looked at the employee, then at the woman, and finally tried to maintain his arrogant posture, as if that title meant nothing. But his face betrayed him. There was a hesitation, a deep discomfort that could not be masked with laughter. Something was stirring within him, perhaps disbelief, perhaps fear, perhaps just the beginning of a painful realization. It was as if, at that very moment, the castle of arrogance he carried had begun to crumble, brick by brick, before a truth he was not prepared to face. The entire room seemed to hold its breath. The woman, still serene, bowed her head in gratitude to the employee, as if she were accustomed to being treated with respect. There was no ostentation in her gestures. There was naturalness, as if this treatment were part of her routine and not an extraordinary event. This detail only reinforced the idea that the billionaire had made a serious mistake, not only moral, but strategic. He had judged someone without knowing anything about their background, without knowing their inner workings, their achievements, their personal revelations, their strength built over a lifetime. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because there's something fascinating about observing how some situations expose, without us realizing it, the true essence of people. The way someone treats those they consider inferior says much more about their mentality than any motivational speech they might repeat. Arrogance is often a fragile curtain that hides insecurity, fear of not being enough, a need to confirm a value that never proves itself. This woman's tranquility, however, revealed something else, a silent power that doesn't need to shout, a confidence that doesn't depend on external validation, a clarity about who she is and the impact her decisions have on the world. And this kind of presence, when placed face to face with someone who lives on appearances, creates a contrast that aggressively exposes the difference between real greatness and imagined greatness. The following seconds were marked by a dense, almost electric silence. The billionaire tried to reorganize his thoughts, searching for a way to regain control of the situation. But it was too late. The narrative had changed, and everyone watching understood this clearly. The feeling was that something grand was about to happen, something that would show the billionaire and everyone there that life always finds a way to reveal the truth hidden behind social masks, a truth that at that moment was beginning to emerge with the force of an inevitable revelation. Write this down. This makes sense to me. The billionaire was still trying to regain his composure when the woman, with the same calm she had maintained from the beginning, set her cup down on the table and stood up. There was no hurry, no aggression, not the slightest trace of a desire for confrontation. It was as if each of her movements carried a natural elegance, the elegance of someone who knows exactly who she is and doesn't need to prove anything to anyone. The silence that formed around them seemed to respect her presence, as if the entire room understood that something grand was about to be revealed. The billionaire, who had previously filled the entire space with his voice and inflated ego, now seemed small before that firm, almost magnetic posture. He followed her movements with his eyes, unsure whether he should say something or just wait. The truth is, even he no longer knew how to act. The woman then smiled, a light, tranquil smile, the kind that doesn't carry resentment, but carries a story. And that simple expression was enough to send a shiver down the spine, because that smile wasn't that of someone being humiliated. It was that of someone about to reveal something that would completely change everyone's perception there. And it was at that moment that she looked directly at the billionaire, with a gaze so firm and so confident that any trace of arrogance in him seemed to wither. He tried to maintain eye contact, but soon looked away, as if he had realized, even without understanding, that he was facing someone much greater than he had imagined. With the same calmness, she said, "Funny you talk so much about standards, value, and appearance, especially considering you've been trying to buy my company for the past few months." The phrase fell like a silent bomb in the room. For a second, no one breathed. The billionaire's eyes widened, trying to process what he had just heard, as if someone had pulled the rug out from under his feet. He opened his mouth to reply, but no words came out. The disbelief that gripped his face was almost palpable. That woman, whom he had considered inferior, was precisely the person he had been trying to reach through meetings, contacts, proposals, and with whom he had always refused to negotiate. The woman continued, "Yes, it's me. I'm the founder and owner of the coffee shop chain you've been wanting to buy." The clarity with which she pronounced those words left no room for doubt, and the impact of this revelation was so great that it seemed to have affected not only the billionaire, but everyone present. That hidden truth, which no one imagined at the beginning of that meeting, was now there, open, strong, non-negotiable. The transformation of the atmosphere was instantaneous. Glances met, discreet murmurs arose, people shifted in their seats trying to grasp what was happening, and the billionaire finally seemed to have understood the extent of his own ignorance. Panic filled his eyes before he could even hide it. It was visible, almost painful to watch. It wasn't just shame, it was the recognition that his actions carried a real, profound, and now irreversible impact. He tried to force a smile, as if he could still regain some control of the situation, but the smile wouldn't reach his eyes. It was the desperate smile of someone who realizes they've lost something too big to ignore. You are, but why?" He couldn't finish his sentences. Each word was a stumble, a failed attempt to reorganize his own internal narrative. The woman, however, didn't seem interested in punishing him. She simply explained with the same composure as before, "I have been personally evaluating all the units in the chain. I like to see the service with my own eyes, to feel the atmosphere as any customer would. Today was one of those days." The simplicity of the explanation contrasted sharply with the complexity of the emotional impact it caused. It was as if she were unveiling not only her identity, but also a philosophy of leadership based on presence, empathy, and truth, something completely opposite to the billionaire's management style, guided by appearances, control, and imposition. His face turned even redder. He knew he had destroyed any chance of a deal right there, in front of everyone, with his own arrogance. It was impossible to repair it. There was no excuse, no justification, no way to undo what he had said minutes before, and when she finished, in an almost reflective tone, "And it was by humiliating the wrong woman that you lost the greatest opportunity of your life." The final blow was delivered. There was no aggression in the phrase. It was simply the statement of a truth, a harsh truth but a just one. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because this type of revelation exposes much more than a role reversal. It exposes how much our decisions, even the seemingly small ones, carry hidden consequences. It exposes how a superiority mentality can blind someone to the point of preventing them from recognizing greatness where it truly lies. This story reminds us that often the behind-the-scenes aspects of a journey are invisible to hasty eyes, and it is precisely in these behind-the-scenes aspects that the greatest strengths, the greatest achievements, the greatest revelations are hidden. The woman did not impose herself. She did not shout. She did not need to prove anything. Her truth spoke for her, and when the truth speaks, it dismantles any facade built on ego and presumption. The billionaire standing there felt the weight of this realization not only as a business mistake, but as an internal shock. His identity, built on a belief in superiority, was now being questioned by someone whose presence was as firm as it was silent. It was as if, for the first time, he saw the destructive impact of his own attitude. And this kind of perception can completely change the course of a life, or it can be ignored. But whoever ignores such a lesson always pays the price later. And as that silence stretched on, laden with meaning, it was possible to perceive that the story still had much to reveal. Write this down. I'm on this journey too. The billionaire remained standing, motionless, as if the revelation had stripped him not only of his arrogance, but also of his ability to fully comprehend what was happening. The woman observed this for a moment, not with disdain, but with the serenity of someone who understands that certain falls don't need a push. They happen on their own, in silence, when the truth finally finds its way to reveal itself. She took a deep breath, not from exhaustion, but from inner conclusion, as if she were closing a chapter much larger than that small encounter could suggest. And then, with a gentle gesture, she turned to the cafe employees and thanked each of them, calling them by name, which surprised those nearby even more. It was evident that she truly knew that place, not as a distant owner, but as someone who walked among the people, who observed the behind-the-scenes workings, who valued stories, faces, individual journeys. After that heartfelt thank you, she reached into her purse and took out her business card, discreetly handing it to the manager. She said she would pay for everyone's coffee. It wasn't a gesture of ostentation. It was a gesture of kindness, of reciprocation, of care. It was as if she wanted to transform that tense moment into something lighter, more human, more memorable, not because of the humiliation she had suffered, but because of the dignity with which she had chosen to respond. And this detail, so simple at first glance, had an enormous impact because it showed that true greatness is not asserted with shouts, but with actions. When she finally faced the billionaire again, there was no trace of resentment in her gaze. There was only a quiet firmness, and it was in that calmness that she uttered the phrase that cut through the silence like an absolute truth. Respect is always worth more than money. There was no need to raise his voice. Each word carried enough weight to fill the entire space, and the billionaire felt each one like a mirror, like a revelation exposing his mistakes, his flaws, his limited mindset. For the first time since entering that cafe, he seemed genuinely ashamed, not because he had been caught, but because he finally realized the cruel impact of his own decisions. He tried to stammer something, perhaps an improvised excuse, perhaps an attempt to repair the damage, but it was too late. No excuse could erase what he had said minutes before, because the humiliation wasn't just in the words, it was in the intention. And intentions, when exposed, carry a force that no one can deny. He realized, in that instant, that he hadn't just lost a billion-dollar deal. He had lost the chance to show who he could be if he had acted with humanity from the beginning. His reputation, built with so much effort in the market, was now before witnesses who would never forget what they saw. And the most painful thing for him wasn't the financial loss, but the moral defeat. The woman, on the other hand, didn't need a victory. Her posture, her mentality, her dignity already said it all. She didn't need to prove superiority, it was enough to exist authentically. And this authenticity inspired, transformed, and made it clear that real success has nothing to do with bank accounts, but with character, with integrity, with how we treat those who cross our path. The moral of that moment transcended any material boundary. It was a reminder that value is not measured by clothing, appearance, or status. Value is measured by how someone chooses to act when no one is watching, or when everyone is. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this subject because there's a silent layer surrounding situations like this, one that few people perceive in the heat of the moment. True transformation doesn't happen when someone wins an argument or exposes a mistake. It happens when consciousness opens to see the impact of one's own actions. And this impact isn't just external, social, visible, it's internal. It shapes the future journey, alters decisions, redefines priorities. The billionaire's downfall wasn't just public, it was intimate. He was confronted not by the force of an argument, but by the force of an unshakable truth, the dignity of someone who refuses to retaliate with cruelty. This revelation is the kind of thing that stays with a person for life, because it exposes not only what they did, but who they are and who they can become if they have the courage to change. As she prepared to leave, the café was still shrouded in respectful silence. Everyone there knew they had witnessed something rare, a silent, profound victory that needed neither shouts nor spectacle to touch the heart of each person present. The woman simply picked up her bag, smiled discreetly, and walked to the door with the lightness of someone who knows they have just left an eternal lesson etched into the atmosphere. Her firm step carried not triumph, but awareness, the awareness that character speaks for itself, and when she crossed that threshold, she carried with her not only her story, but the powerful reaffirmation that no one is less for appearing simple, and no one is more for appearing important. And there in that small café, the mark of transformation remained. It became evident that life doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers, and those who pay attention to those whispers discover that they are what truly change everything. Comment below. This makes sense to me, and if you've made it this far, you can feel that this story touched you in some way, perhaps through silent justice, perhaps through the transformation that happens when the truth comes out, perhaps simply because you recognize something of your own journey in this simple yet profound encounter. That's why I want to invite you, in a very gentle way, to be part of this space of stories that inspire and awaken awareness. Subscribe unto the channel to continue walking with me through narratives that move us from within, that help adjust our mindset and see the impact of our daily choices. Each video here is designed to deliver something true, something that makes sense in real life, and I would love to see you here again. And since you stayed with me until the end, leave a comment saying, "I'm with you until the end." It's a simple way for me to know who really lived this whole story with me, who was present in every detail of this reflection. Also, your like helps strengthen the connection we created throughout the video, shows that this type of content has value for you, and paves the way for more people to find these messages that make a difference. And before you go, there's a video here that perfectly complements everything we've talked about today. Click and stay with me there. The next story might surprise you even more.